The desert sun burned harshly on Lyra's skin as she stumbled over the shifting sands. Every step was painful, her throat dry and cracked. She carried nothing with her. No water, no supplies, only the heavy weight of the scorn her own people had cast upon her. Impure, they had called her over and over. That word had followed her all her life, like a shadow she could never escape. It wasn't her fault that her skin had a faint silver streak, or that her bloodline carried a small mutation considered unclean by her society. Yet it marked her, separated her, and made her invisible in the eyes of those who mattered most. The village well was behind her now, and she remembered how the guards had turned her away that morning. They had refused to fill her water container, claiming that no one like her deserved even a sip. The villagers watched silently, some smirking, others averting their eyes, afraid to be associated with her impurity. She had tried to argue, to plead, but words meant nothing. Lyra's hands had clenched around her empty flask, her nails biting into her palms, but it changed nothing. Their judgment was absolute, and survival was secondary to them. She had thought she could reach the southern oasis before her strength gave out. It was a place few dared to go, and it was rumored that travelers who survived its harsh path discovered water and shade sufficient to last several days. But the desert had its own rules. The heat pressed down on her shoulders like a living weight, and the wind carried grains of sand that stung her eyes. Lyra's legs trembled with exhaustion, but she refused to sit. Sitting meant surrendering, and surrendering meant death. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only minutes. Time seemed meaningless under the blazing sun. Lyra's vision blurred and her thoughts became fragmented. She remembered her mother's face, kind and warm, before the village elders had labeled her daughter impure and forced them apart. Lyra had been young, barely able to understand why she was treated differently, but the memory still stung. She had promised herself she would survive, that she would not let their cruelty define her. Yet now each step felt heavier, and her resolve wavered. Then she saw something unusual in the distance, a small figure walking steadily toward her. At first she thought it might be another guard sent to drive her away, or perhaps some other traveler seeking to exploit the oasis. Her first instinct was to hide behind a dune to remain unseen. But the figure did not rush toward her with malice. Instead, he moved calmly, deliberately, carrying something in his hand. As he came closer, Lyra saw the shape of a human, a species she had read about in ancient texts but had never seen up close. His skin was light and unmarked, and his movements were careful, measured, as if he respected the land rather than trying to conquer it. The man noticed her immediately, and for the first time in hours, Lyra felt a flicker of hope. His eyes were kind, not judgmental, and they seemed to carry curiosity rather than disdain. "Are you all right?" he asked in a soft voice, his words strange but understandable. Lyra could barely nod. Her lips moved dryly and she croaked, "Water, please." The human nodded and lifted a small metal flask from his pack. He unscrewed the cap and held it toward her. Lyra hesitated. Her life had taught her not to trust easily, not when kindness was so rare. Still, her body rebelled against caution. Her throat burned unbearably and her legs refused to carry her any further. With trembling hands, she reached for the flask. As soon as the water touched her lips, relief washed over her like a sudden rainstorm. She drank greedily, gulp after gulp, feeling her strength returning bit by bit. The human did not flinch or scold her for drinking so much. He simply waited, patient and calm. Lyra looked up at him with wide eyes, astonished by the simple act of generosity. She had never met anyone like this before. The people of her village would have scorned a stranger just for touching her flask. Yet here was a human who offered life itself without hesitation. "My name is Ethan," he said, observing her carefully. "I'm exploring this desert." You're alone?" His accent was strange, unfamiliar, but it carried warmth. Lyra's lips formed words with difficulty. "Lyra, I am alone. They would not help me." Ethan nodded, understanding without judgment. "Then come with me. I have more water at my camp. You can rest there until you regain your strength." Lyra wanted to refuse. She had spent her life hiding, surviving, avoiding both humans and her own kind when possible. Trusting someone so quickly felt dangerous, but she knew she had no other option. Her legs wobbled as she followed Ethan, and every step reminded her how weak she had become. He supported her gently, not touching more than necessary, letting her maintain what dignity she had left. The journey to his camp was slow. Ethan shared small details about the desert, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the rare creatures that survived the harsh climate. Lyra listened, captivated, though she remained wary. His calm voice was comforting, and his presence made the desert feel less like a prison. For the first time in her life, she realized that kindness could exist even in a place ruled by cruelty and fear. As they neared the camp, Ethan explained that he was part of a research mission studying alien flora and survival methods. Lyra had never met someone so genuinely curious about her world, about her species, without the intention to harm or dominate. She felt a strange mixture of awe and gratitude. Here was a being who saw her not as impure, not as a burden, but as someone worth knowing. The camp was small, made of simple tents and shaded areas. Ethan offered her more water and some food. Lyra drank carefully, savoring every sip and bite. She noticed that Ethan respected the environment, using minimal resources and always leaving the desert as untouched as possible. This attention to balance and life impressed her deeply. She realized how different humans could be, how they could respect life in ways her own people often ignored. For hours, they talked quietly. Lyra told Ethan about her life, about being cast aside, and about the pain of living among people who deemed her unworthy. She spoke in fragments at first, then more openly as trust grew. Ethan listened without interrupting, without pity, without judgment. He asked questions gently, showing interest in her experiences, in her thoughts, in her feelings. As night fell, the desert transformed. The scorching heat gave way to a cool breeze and the sky filled with countless stars. Lyra had seen the sky before, but tonight it seemed different, almost alive. She felt a sense of calm she hadn't known for years. She realized that despite the cruelty of her own world, there were beings like Ethan who could change her perception, who could remind her that survival was not just about endurance, but also about hope and connection. Ethan noticed her gaze and said softly, "The desert is harsh, but it also teaches us who we are. You've survived because you're strong, Lyra, stronger than you realize." Lyra blinked at him, surprised by his words. Strength was not something she had ever claimed. She had only tried to endure. But Ethan's calm confidence in her abilities planted a seed of belief she had long forgotten. Perhaps she was not as powerless as her people had made her feel. Perhaps survival did not have to be lonely. They stayed by the fire, speaking little but sharing presence until exhaustion took over. Lyra found a corner of the tent and curled up, grateful for the small comfort of shelter. She was aware of the constant dangers of the desert and the disapproval of her society, but for the first time in her life, she felt a flicker of hope that she could survive not just physically, but emotionally as well. Before sleep claimed her completely, she whispered to herself, "Maybe. Not all beings are cruel. Maybe kindness exists beyond the rules they impose." And for the first time in many years, Lyra allowed herself to hope that she could live, not just exist, but truly live, and that someone like Ethan might show her how. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly under the starry sky, indifferent yet alive. Inside the small tent, a fragile bond was forming, one built on trust, courage, and the simple act of sharing water. It was a beginning, not just of survival, but of a story that could change the course of a life, perhaps even a society that had long forgotten what compassion meant. Lyra drifted into sleep, her mind filled with possibilities. The desert, harsh and unyielding, had brought her to a human who reminded her that even the smallest acts of kindness could carry the power to transform a life. And in the quiet of the night, under the gaze of countless stars, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, the faint, tender warmth of hope. Alex moved silently through the dimly lit corridors of the Zalaris Diplomatic Center, his footsteps barely making a sound on the smooth metallic floor. Even with years of training as a human envoy, he still felt a flutter of nervous energy whenever he entered alien territory. The Zalaris were known for their elegance, intelligence, and subtle ways of testing those who walked among them. Alex had always admired them from afar, fascinated by their pale, iridescent skin that seemed to shimmer under every kind of light, and their large, expressive eyes that gave nothing away yet hinted at depths humans could scarcely understand. The assignment had seemed straightforward at first. Observe, take notes, and report on cultural behaviors for the human government. Simple, boring, and completely routine. At least that was what Alex had thought. But as soon as he arrived on the planet, it became clear that routine wasn't part of the Zalaris way. Every interaction carried weight, every glance had meaning, and every corner of their city seemed to hum with intelligence. He adjusted the strap of his utility pack and paused outside the door labeled Lyra, Diplomatic Quarters. His heart quickened. Lyra was the lead diplomat for the Xylaris, responsible for maintaining interstellar peace and negotiating treaties that affected countless worlds. Her reputation was impeccable, her intellect unmatched. And yet here he was, standing outside her private quarters, curiosity winning over caution. Alex's orders had been clear: study Xylaris customs, but never invade personal space. He repeated that phrase in his head over and over, as though it were a mantra. But humans as a species had a natural hunger for understanding. They looked, they asked questions, they explored, and right now, Alex wanted to see how a Xylaris prepared for a formal diplomatic event. It was a detail, he reasoned, a small insight that could reveal much about their society. He pressed his ear lightly against the door, straining to hear. The room was quiet except for faint movements and soft humming, something almost musical. Then, without thinking, he leaned just slightly, enough to see through the edge of the partially open door. Lyra stood inside. She was arranging a set of garments, tall and graceful, her movements precise yet fluid. The colors of the fabric seemed alive, shifting in subtle shades as she handled them. Alex immediately realized he had made a mistake, but before he could pull back, Lyra's large eyes snapped toward him. For a moment, Alex froze. His mind raced. Panic surged through him, imagining the scolding, the diplomatic incident, or worse, being considered a spy. But Lyra didn't move as he had feared. She didn't yell or gesture angrily. She simply walked toward the door with a calm, deliberate pace, her eyes still fixed on him. Alex swallowed hard, trying to find words, but none came. He could feel the heat rising in his face, a flush that was unmistakably human. Finally, he managed a strained, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. You were curious, Lyra finished for him. Her voice was smooth, melodic, yet carried an authority that made Alex instinctively stand taller despite his embarrassment. Humans are always curious. I can see that clearly now, Alex blinked. This wasn't what he expected. He had prepared for anger, reprimand, or at least a warning. Not understanding. Lyra studied him for a moment, her head tilted slightly, an expression that seemed both analytical and amused. It is unusual for a human to take such risks, she continued. But I find it interesting. Alex's mind spun. Interesting? She wasn't upset? I just wanted to understand your customs, he stammered. I promise it wasn't meant disrespectfully. Humans value knowledge. We try to learn everything we can when we encounter a new culture. I didn't think I'd get caught. A small smile curved Lyra's lips, and Alex realized she wasn't scolding him at all. Her gaze softened slightly, and the tension that had been suffocating him began to lift, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Then perhaps we should start over, she said. I am Lyra, you are human. You wish to understand us? Yes, Alex replied, relief washing over him. I am Alex. I'm part of the human delegation observing diplomatic practices. I didn't intend to intrude on your privacy. It was a mistake, Lyra's smile widened just a fraction. Mistakes are valuable. They reveal true character. I am curious, Alex, about the human way. You act boldly, even recklessly, yet with respect, that is, unusual among your kind. Alex exhaled, his heartbeat gradually slowing. He realized he had been preparing for confrontation when, in fact, he was being offered a rare opportunity. An honest conversation with a Xylaris diplomat in her private quarters. No barriers, no pretenses. Over the next several minutes, Lyra asked questions, not about treaties or politics, but about human thought, human curiosity, and human adaptability. Alex found himself speaking freely, explaining not only the values of his species, but also why humans took risks, why they sought knowledge at every turn, and why mistakes were often embraced as lessons rather than failures. In return, Lyra shared aspects of Xylaris culture he had never known. She explained how privacy worked for them, not as a protective barrier, but as a way of controlling energy and attention. She described their rituals for preparation, the importance of visual presentation in negotiations, and the subtle signals embedded in gestures and expressions. Alex listened, absorbing every word, realizing that understanding the Xylaris required more than observation. It required empathy, imagination, and a willingness to see the universe from an entirely different perspective. Time passed quickly. Alex lost track of minutes or perhaps hours as he and Lyra exchanged knowledge. The initial awkwardness melted into a curious, tentative friendship. He learned that her species viewed knowledge as sacred, and she, in turn, seemed fascinated by the human ability to adapt to danger, improvise, and think in unpredictable ways. Eventually, Alex realized he needed to return to his quarters before his absence became suspicious. He straightened, ready to step away, but Lyra stopped him with a gesture. "Before you leave, Alex, know this. Curiosity is respected here. Boldness is admired. And humans have potential I have rarely witnessed." Alex nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. He had come seeking understanding, and he had found respect. It was more than he had hoped for. "Thank you, Lyra. I won't forget this," he said. She inclined her head. "And I will not forget you. Perhaps humans will surprise us yet. Perhaps your kind will thrive where others hesitate." As Alex left her quarters, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This encounter, awkward and unexpected though it had been, had shown him something essential about humans: their curiosity, their courage, and their ability to forge connections even in the most alien of circumstances. He realized that sometimes mistakes were not failures. They were gateways to understanding, bridges between worlds, and opportunities to prove that humanity could not only survive among the stars but could thrive. Walking down the corridor, Alex allowed himself a small smile. The mission had suddenly become more than just observation. It had become a chance to show the Xylaris and perhaps the galaxy that humans were more than fragile beings. They were resilient, inventive, and capable of understanding even the most distant, advanced civilizations. And he had just taken the first step.